16 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour, and Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program. Randy Holhut, our usual guest, talking about stories in the Commons each and every Friday. Randy actually having surgery today up at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, and we do want to wish him well on that. He mentioned it last Friday. It's also at the bottom of the sports section this week in the Commons, but happy to have pinch hitting for Randy, Mike Faher, back here in the studio for the first time in a long time, and certainly great to see you again, Mike. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And you're very well prepared this morning. I see a huge jug of water, as well as is that coffee in there?
That's coffee.
Okay,
yeah.
so a little bit of
notes,
both there.
Yeah, we're leaving nothing to chance.
Well caffeinated, well hydrated for your first appearance since you've become a reporter for the Commons as well as VTDigger. People seeing your writing there, and just talking off air a little bit. I mean, when this was conceived, the idea was to get some Southern Vermont coverage for VTDigger, but also it seems like you have some specialties as far as topics.
Yeah, I do a lot of Vermont Yankee decommissioning. I do Act 46, which is a big topic for schools right now. A lot of energy reporting.
Yeah, a lot of energy reporting, which makes sense because of the VY connection down here, but also I think, and we're going to get into this, some of the stories around renewable energy and renewable energy siting seem to be hot topics down here. Schools as well. Healthcare is coming back around as a hot topic again, and you were just at the all-payer model meeting that took place at the retreat on Wednesday. That story out on VTDigger, out in the Reformer as well, ironically, and will be in the Commons next week, I'm sure. But firsthand here, this first of all, they added this forum late. Right. They'd said they were doing 3 public forums, and I remember making the comment on the air. I was like, they're not coming anywhere near Southern Vermont, so somebody else must have spoken up. I don't know if you know who that was who said, hey, come on down here and tell the Southern Vermont voters about it.
I know there were at least a few legislators who said, hey, guys, we need a meeting here. The governor mentioned at the meeting on Wednesday that there had been, in his words, rumblings that we needed a Brattleboro or Windham County meeting. So, right, to their credit, they put it together and got all the healthcare bigwigs to come down and have a 2-hour meeting. Yeah,
right. Remember us here? We're part of the state too, and so Green Mountain Care Chair Al Gobeil, a number of other people, all quoted in your story about this all-payer healthcare system. Your sense of what this is, first of all, what they're trying to accomplish with this model.
Yeah, it's really complex. Healthcare policy is a different world. But as I understand it, in a nutshell, they're going to change, or they want to change, the way healthcare providers are paid. And they think that by doing that, they can not only cut healthcare costs, they can improve the quality of care. Whether they can actually do those things remains to be seen. Right. But the core principle is that you're not going to do the quote-unquote fee-for-service model where doctors are essentially compensated based on the volume of care they provide. They'll be compensated based on the quality of care and the outcomes that their patients get.
Yeah, what makes this unprecedented, from what I understand about it, because accountable care organizations are something that were established through the Affordable Care Act, these ACOs. This is going to be the first time the state is really going to be the ACO, right? Where all the money, whether it's coming from private insurance or whether it's coming from the federal payers like Medicare and Medicaid, it's going to be the state of Vermont that's going to decide how that gets dispersed and what it gets dispersed for.
Well, the interesting thing is, the state is making a big point of saying we're not directly involved in this. So there is an ACO that will be set up, but it's actually going to be a separate entity from the state of Vermont.
That's smart.
Yeah. and they made a big point during the meeting on Wednesday to say, we're not taking over the payment. This is not single payer. Your insurance will stay your insurance. So I think it's an attempt to sort of distance themselves a little bit, even though this is their idea, after the Vermont Health Connect fiasco, to say, look, we, the state, are not taking over the healthcare system. That's not how it's going to work.
Now, one of the quotes that is in your story from Spoon Agave, where he said, this is so complex, I don't even know what questions to ask. And anybody who knows Spoons knows he's a thoughtful guy, a smart guy. So the complexity of this issue, how did it go over in the room? If somebody like Spoon, it wasn't even sure what questions to ask, do you think they were able to get through some of the basic concepts of this to basically who the customers are going to be?
Yeah, he actually used the word gobbledygook, which I had to look up before I put it in. But
is that in the dictionary, gobbledygook?
Yeah, it actually
it is.
Okay, good. Little known fact. Yeah, I think it's like I said at the outset, it is really complex, and the state did a good job of going through a long slide presentation and trying to here's the definitions, here's the concepts we're talking about, and I'm sure for the healthcare providers in the room, it made a lot more sense than for the lay people, including myself. I know that I had to go back and I recorded the session and had to listen to it again in the afternoon before I wrote the story just to make sure I had the core concepts down. And I actually talked with someone from the state yesterday who corrected me on a minor point. But it is really complex, and I think that's why it's hard to sell these things. Even if you spent 2 hours in that room with the state healthcare folks the other morning, there's no guarantee that you're going to grasp how this all works.
Right. Well, and the providers, people like the Brattleboro Retreat, Dr. Louis Josephson, their president and CEO, he may grasp the concept. He may not be on board with this as an all-payer model. Talk a little bit about the reaction from some of the entities. Some of those providers seemed, as you put it, skeptical.
Yeah, I think his quote was the devil is in the details. That conceptually this sounds like a great idea. I don't think anybody is against better outcomes in healthcare and lower cost. They're projecting like a 6% growth rate in healthcare costs, and when you project that out, the costs are in the billions. The question is how is it going to work? What's the execution going to be? And again, I can't help but think that people are going to look at the experience with Vermont Health Connect and the state exchange and the mess that's been for 2 years and wonder, can the state pull off this all-payer thing?
Yeah. Well, they're going to have, if this does go through, a significant amount of money, something like $250 million in federal money to play with. That's got to be the big driver in doing this. Is just like last year with the payroll tax that Governor Shumlin wanted to implement. He's really looking for help with the financing of this.
Right. But I got the impression that that's not really going to cover it. They're counting.
That's not enough money.
Right.
Okay.
And they're counting on a certain level of savings that's built into the model. The idea, if we can get people healthier, we're going to spend less on inpatient care. And even the chairman of the Green Mountain Care Board said repeatedly on Wednesday there's some risk here.
Yeah.
But he believes it's a risk to keep doing what we're doing.
This is a draft plan, and that's why they're taking public comment right now. And this was the last of the forums, I believe.
Right.
Do you get a sense that there's going to be significant revisions to the draft before it goes to a vote at the Green Mountain Care Board?
I don't know about revisions. It certainly sounds as if they're going to move on something, if they're going to sign this deal, it'll be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the vote is going to happen this month or early in November. Did they give a timeline as to when they would make a decision?
They didn't. They made a point of how many people, including the governor, have to sign off on it. My guess is that the governor, before he leaves office, wants to try to get this underway and have it be part of his legacy.
Yeah, and have that football kicked to the next governor and the next legislative session, indeed. Certainly the beginning of, or I guess to be continued when you take the whole continuum of healthcare conversation here. Happy to have Mike Faher help explain it to us here on the Green Mountain Mornings program. We'll talk to him about some other stories in this week's edition of The Commons and online at commonsnews.org after the bottom of the hour news break. 43 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program, continuing my conversation now with Mike Faher of the Commons. Pinch hitting for Randy Holhut this morning for our regular Friday conversation with your reader-supported, award-winning, I almost said Wind there because that's what we're going to talk about, Mike, but award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County, free on stands every Wednesday. But go to commonsnews.org and become a member of this great organization today. Help support all the work that reporters like Mike are doing out there. Mike, it's been great to talk to Randy about some of these renewable energy stories that you've been covering, but I'm really happy to go to the source, so to speak, here. You've been in the rooms for a lot of these conversations that are happening in different communities around renewable energy siting. No more place that it's been controversial than in the Windham and Grafton area with Iberdrola with this Stylesbrook project, recently revising the project, lowering the amount of turbines from 28 to 24, increasing the incentive for the communities by about $500,000, changing the way they're going to allocate that incentive, and we'll get to that. But back when they presented this array at the beginning of this whole process, over a year ago, I want to say, when they first laid out this 28 turbine array, I was saying, and I remember your story about talking about it's the biggest array in the state of Vermont. I remember saying to Randy, this is a starting point in the negotiations. They're going to have to go lower with the amount of turbines at some point. Surprising to me that it took this long into the process for them to get to the point where they're going to just remove 4 turbines.
Well, yeah, surprising, but you might say that the timing is, maybe perfect for the company, right? Because we're less than a month out from the 2 towns voting on the project, so it's a time to say, look, Windham and Grafton, here's some concessions to what you've been talking about, and as you say, the financial incentives came down at the same time as the project revision, and offering $500,000 more to those towns per year.
But all I'm hearing from coverage of this is opposition. We've seen a smattering of support for it now. The people who own the land, certainly of the Stilesbrook area, are in favor of this. There's some things here and there, but the select boards in the 2 towns, most of the people coming to these meetings seem to be people who are in opposition to it. If I'm Iberdrola and I'm reading the writing on the wall, I would have come with a counter proposal 4 months ago, 5 months ago, so you'd have another chance for another counter proposal, unless this really is their take it or leave it deal before the November 8th vote.
Well, I think, that I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a hard thing for me to get a handle on, how many people actually oppose the project, how many people are in favor. I think the people who tend to show up for public meetings, the people who tend to speak to the press, quite honestly, are folks who have very strong feelings. And there's a lot of folks, probably like you and I, who are just living their daily lives, and they may not have an opinion, or if they might be in favor. They're not apt, though, to come to a public meeting and speak out. So it's really hard when you talk to folks in the know up there. It's really hard for them to say how these votes are going to go.
Really? I mean, they really think there's a silent majority out there. I mean, I watch what Grafton is doing as far as waffling on even having a vote on November 8th. They wanted to have this other poll first. I'm like, why have the poll? Iberdrola says they will adhere to the decision of the folks in the town on November 8th. It sounds like a done deal to me that it's going to get rejected. Just get it on the ballot.
Right. Well, and that's, there must be some uncertainty about how the residents are going to vote, hence the need to bring in the voices of the non-residents.
Right, the second homeowners.
I mean, I just can't sit here and say one way or the other. I do know that I've talked to some folks, including at the meetings a few weeks ago in Windham, where they said, I feel pretty good about this project, but I don't want to talk to you about it. Because
really?
The atmosphere, and I don't mean this in any way to blame one side or the other. I think the atmosphere has gotten so, quite frankly, poisonous that there are a lot of folks who just don't want to get involved one way or the other.
Yeah. Now, when people say they feel good about the project, is it that they don't mind the wind turbines, or is it the money? I mean, because it is a pretty significant windfall for these 2 communities.
It is.
Even before they upped the deal.
Yeah, and part of the New Deal, and the very controversial part of the New Deal, are these direct partnership payments, is what they call them.
Yeah.
Essentially, every voter in Windham, every voter in Grafton, once the project is built, would get a certain amount of money. It's over $1,000 a person in Windham. And of course, that led to accusations of buying votes and bribery and a review by the Attorney General's office.
Now, how did the Attorney General office clarify this as not buying votes? I mean, the way they laid it out, hey, everybody, once again, we're going to do this on an individual voter basis. Maybe it was the language that they used. They said every resident versus every voter, but it seemed to me the language was clearly targeted at that ballot initiative.
Yeah, the AG's reasoning was that there's no quote unquote quid pro quo. I wanted to make sure I said that right on the radio. But the idea is that no matter how you vote on this project, you could vote no, you could vote yes, you could not vote at all. Iberdrola can't know that. But if it passes and the project is built, you, again, regardless of your vote, can take advantage of these payments. They're not predicating payment on a favorable vote from Joe Citizen in Windham or Grafton. One of the other legal elements they looked at based on a U.S. Supreme Court case was the fact that this offer was made not in some dark alley or back corridor, but in an open public meeting for everyone to scrutinize. So that's the rationale of the state as to why this doesn't violate Vermont's, quote, I think it's purity of elections law.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Purity of elections law.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the take it or leave it deal from Iberdrola? I mean, as you said, we're getting close to this vote time. And really, let's be honest, you talk about that anti-wind faction. There's no compromise that is going to make them feel satisfied and allow them to construct turbines there if they have their way.
Yeah, I think at this point, Iberdrola could say, we're going to plant flowers and not turbines, and there would be folks who are upset. And again, I don't mean that to downplay the concerns of the local residents at all. It's just gotten really contentious. As far as is this the final offer, it's hard to say. There are some who say it's not, the opponents of the project. And we got to remember that really all this mess for the last 4 years has been preliminary. Iberdrola has not yet even filed an application for a permit with the state. And that's the key. To get this project built, they need that permit. They haven't done it yet. Right.
And this is certainly, I think, a test case for renewable energy. Even though we've seen wind installations, we've seen solar arrays, the backlash from communities about citing local control rose to a legislative level, was very contentious during the last session. When you're looking at this and you cover energy for VTDigger beyond the borders of Windham County and the work you do here in the Commons, are you seeing this as something that is really going to be something that becomes an example for the rest of the state and the rest of this conversation?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a test case, especially the fact that this giant multinational company has pinned the fate of this project, at least their involvement in this project, on the vote of two very small towns. They didn't have to do that. They did it. At the meeting in Windham a few weeks ago, the New York Times was there with a reporter and a photographer. So I think it has implications even beyond the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
People are watching it.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating to see, no matter what that vote is on November 8th, if Iberdrola actually does accept the vote like they say they are, or if they do get the votes from this silent majority that may be out there, what the next steps are with opposition. Want to also shift to another story you had in this week's edition of the Commons about Santina Leparati. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Ms. Leparati.
You can just call her Sunny. That's what she goes by.
Oh, is that right? Sunny, okay.
Correct, yeah.
Well, so a new position, Southern Vermont Economy Manager. This gets to this whole idea about paying more attention to economic development here in the southern part of Vermont. Is this part of that zone, right? The Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone that Laura Sibilia helped construct?
Yeah, the zone is basically Windham and Bennington counties. It was created by the legislature last year, but it's kind of a zone in theory only. There was no funding attached to it.
Right.
But then after the fact, there were some grant. The state allocated some money. There was a federal grant of $230,000, if I have that number right. And part of that money is going toward this new sort of manager for that area, and her job is to try to bring people together from all walks of life, anybody who has an interest in improving the economy in those two counties, and figure out who's doing what, how can we do it better, how can we do it together, and what sort of are the big priorities we should be pursuing.
Yeah, and she's over here, right? She's in our community. She live in Brattleboro?
I'm not sure.
Or she based out of Brattleboro?
She's based in Brattleboro at BDCC.
Yeah, so it was easy to get in touch with her and sit down for this conversation. When you got a sense, and people should read the story to get her full background, but the type of background she comes from and applying it to this new position seemed like a good fit.
Yeah, she's done everything from affordable housing to working with seniors and volunteers, and she seems to have a lot of energy, and I think she'll probably need it. Trying to bring together two counties. Geography is an obstacle when you talk about Windham and Bennington counties.
Yeah, it sure is. She's young, so that's the an important part of the face here of what we need to think. And when you think about those sorts of issues, right, those aren't economic development issues. Those are the issues that economic development fixes. I think that's really the nice thing about her qualifications here. Did she lay out to you in terms of if she has a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, those sorts of things?
Well, the interesting thing is the federal money that BDCC got to to launch this Southern Vermont Economy Project, it's only a 2-year deal. So they've got to, it's obviously it'll take time, but they've got to show some results, presumably, so that they can continue this beyond that 2-year time frame. Whether they'll be successful, I think a lot of it's going to depend on how many people work with them.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, BDCC right now, they have to start showing results, and I think they are. I don't mean it to say like it's do or die for BDCC, but, they're obviously well into this Southern Vermont Economic Development Strategies project at this point. The Windham County Economic Development Funds, they've had a lot of things going on for a while that I do expect to see a report from them soon. And by soon, I mean 12 to 18 months out, really showing that things are going in the direction they anticipated. Maybe you feel the same or you feel differently?
Yeah, they've got a lot going on even beyond the Southern Vermont economy stuff. It all kind of ties together. One of the interesting things that BDCC is doing is this green building cluster. You've probably heard about that, where we've got all these really interesting experts in green building, environmentally friendly building, and how do we bring them together? Again, it feels like a lot of what they're doing is trying to reach out and gather everyone up and say, let's work together. And that's hard, especially in Vermont, where everything is so town-centric. Mm-hmm. It's not even, in other states, the county is the primary governmental entity. And here it's the town. And so I think they struggle against that a little bit. But certainly the entities who have funded them are going to expect results. And I would expect that the local residents will too.
Yeah, well, and when they do reveal results, I'm sure you or somebody else from the Commons will be there to report on them. Talk a little bit about some other things you're working on right now. I know there's a press conference later on today you're going to be at, some things that are going to be in next week's edition of the Commons and on VTDigger with your byline.
Yeah, the event today is they're releasing a report that's supposed to sort of provide advice to other communities that are going through the closure of a nuclear plant like we have here. And the title of it is When People and Money Leave and the Plant Stays, Lessons Learned from the Closure of Vermont Yankee. So that's a big press conference I'll be covering today. It'll be in Vermont Digger and the Commons and presumably the Reformer as well. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Vermont Digger has a very cool thing that they just launched this week. It's a comprehensive guide to the general election. So if you go to vermontdigger.org and you click on, it's a very prominent link, you can look at every candidate who's running for state office, House, Senate, otherwise, and look at their key positions, their contact info, their bio. It's a very cool interactive thing, and check it out.
Check that out. Yeah. Check out Mike on the pages of VTDigger.org and in the pages of the Commons, your reader-supported, award-winning independent news and view source for Windham County, also online at commonsnews.org. Great to see you, Mike. We need to come up with an excuse to get you in here that doesn't involve Randy needing surgery.
Absolutely.
All right. That'll do it for the conversation with Mike. Back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings after these messages.